You know, it didn't soak in. When somebody tells you that someone's just gone.
September 26, 1981 is a day that Otis Kinsey says he will never forget. A call from his ex-wife in Oklahoma City changed the rest of his life.
She called and said, "We need you to come up here." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "Charlotte's gone." And it didn't register on me.
His daughter, 13-year-old Charlotte Kinsey, went missing that day from the Oklahoma State Fair, starting a search that would consume his entire life.
Police, you know, they'll tell you bits and pieces, and you gotta read between the lines.
Between those lines was a story that would never completely come to an end, and a name Otis says he'll never forget.
Royal Russell Long.
Royal Russell Long was a part-time carny and a long-haul trucker. Investigators say he was known for going around to state fairs and carnivals like this one and enticing young girls with the promise of a job to unload stuffed animals from a truck that never existed. On September 26, 1981, Charlotte Kinsey and her friend Cinda Pallett accepted that job offer. The two girls had gone to the fair with their boyfriends. After calling their moms for permission, the four kids left with Long.
He got all the kids in the car and took them, said, "We got to go meet the truck out here."
The boys later told investigators Long took them to a nearby truck stop, but the truck was not there. He asked the boys to get out and wait in case it showed up, while he and the girls went to check the next stop. The boys watched as the car drove away. That was the last time Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallett were seen alive.
Her mother is no longer living. You know, that devastated her. She talked about her till her dying day.
Christy Lane says Charlotte's mother kept her room just the way she left it for 8 years after she vanished, hanging on to the hope that one day her daughter would come home. She was just 5 months old when her sister disappeared, but Christy remembers growing up hearing Charlotte's story. Today, she says it has profoundly affected the way she raises her own children.
I won't even let them run around the block, like just, you know, ride their bikes around the block, anything like that. I'm like very overprotective.
I just don't know. Something like that just leaves you feeling bitter.
Otis still remembers the last time he saw Charlotte like it was yesterday. And today, he says he can't help but look for her face in every crowd.
If I'm at a mall or a carnival or something and I see a little girl like that, you feel almost impelled to go look at the face. And Charlotte would be in her 30s, 40s now. And, you know, you just hang on to these memories.
In Bells, Jayla Gray.
On September 26, 1981, Royal Russell Long drove Charlotte Kinsey, Cinda Pallett, and their two boyfriends to this truck stop just off I-40. When they got here and there was no truck waiting, Long asked the boys to get out and wait while he went to check the next stop. The boys later told investigators they watched as the car drove away and the two girls waved out the back window. That was the last time Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallett would ever be seen.
After the third or fourth day of the initial investigation after the girls disappeared, Royal Russell Long was removed as a person of interest.
But the focus of that investigation would come back to Long about 3 years later. By the time he again became the main suspect in the Kinsey and Pallett case, he was already serving a life sentence in a Wyoming prison for kidnapping and raping 2 young hitchhikers. One girl escaped, but Long took off with the 12-year-old Sharon Baldeagle, who was never seen again. Former prosecutor Ray Elliott had just begun his career as assistant district attorney in Oklahoma City when Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallett disappeared. Little did he know that case would consume his life.
I literally lived, ate, breathed, and slept that case.
It was the second bodiless murder trial in Oklahoma history and captured the attention of people nationwide. Mike Gassaway defended Long in the 1985 trial.
There's a lot of tension because it appeared to me that the district attorney's office was taking this matter personally as opposed to professionally.
You can take a case both personally and professionally. As district attorney of this county, I take it personally anytime a character like Royal Russell Long comes into this county and kidnaps 2 of our young girls and then murders them.
The prosecution built a case with overwhelming evidence against Long, including the testimony of the two boys who identified him as the man who drove away with the girls, and the rental car with a trunk mat that had been painted.
So we luminoled this mat, and there came a perfect silhouette of two small bodies laying back to back on that mat, outlined in blood.
A long blonde hair was found stuck in the paint in the corner of that mat, and a large chunk of blonde hair was also found in Long's home in Wyoming. A forensic expert testified that those hairs were a match to Charlotte Kinsey. Investigators found that Long had been trained as a meat cutter when serving time years earlier in California. They even had a confession Long made to a fellow inmate in Wyoming.
He says to the inmate that was seated next to him that if you cut the bodies up small enough and put them in a rat hole, they'll never find them.
But Judge Charles Owens would not allow the inmate to testify. In fact, Judge Owens threw out several vital pieces to the prosecution's case, including the testimony of Long's own daughter, who said he had molested her many times.
She had witnessed him on numerous occasions try to entice young girls into the cab of his truck, either by the use of a live puppy or most often with stuffed animals, which again was clearly his MO in our case.
Judge Owens ruled that there was not enough evidence to send Long to trial.
If Royal Russell Long is in fact guilty as charged in this case, it would appear that law enforcement officials of the state of Oklahoma, quote, picked him before he was ripe.
At that point, I realized the case was over.
Elliott says Long remained confident throughout the trial and would taunt the family when he walked by, saying things like he was the only one who would ever know the real story, and telling prosecutors that he would not go down for this because the big boys owed him a favor.
In my opinion, he was referring to the FBI, and that somehow he felt in his mind that the big boys, being the FBI, owed him a favor in light of his informant activities, and that he was going to call in that favor.
As much as we hurt and gone through trying to find our daughters, to me it's pretty inhumane of anybody to sit back and say, well, I can prove your daughter's alive, and yet not provide any of it.
When Long walked out, they said he'd done it. But they, you know, I mean, you could tell that that was the end of it.
In Oklahoma City, Jayla Gray.
You'll go to anybody. You'll do anything. I mean, when something like this happens, you go to places you never thought you would go. You'll do things you never thought you could do.
Otis Kinsey says over the last 30 years, he's gone to great lengths to find his daughter. But the only person who truly knows where she is would never tell him. In 1985, after days of taunting the family during the trial, saying he was the only one who would ever know the real story, Royal Russell Long was acquitted in the Oklahoma City murder case of 13-year-old Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallett. He was taken back to a Wyoming prison to continue serving out a life sentence for kidnapping and raping 2 other girls. In 1993, Long died of a heart attack on the prison lawn, taking with him the answer to the one question the Kinsey family is still looking for till this day.
We would have to go to all these cities, and they'll throw you a book of all the remains they found and say, hey, you look through it, knock yourself out.
You know, I spend a lot of time researching it because I would really like, you know, the thought of her being somewhere labeled unidentified just seems terrible.
But former prosecutor Ray Elliott says he doesn't think the girls' remains will ever be found. He says what investigators really knew about Royal Russell Long would sicken most people, like things he had said to his own daughter, who said he had molested her many times.
Her father had told her, one, that no female over the age of 13 could satisfy him sexually.
Long's daughter also told investigators how she'd witnessed him try to lure young girls into his truck in several different fairs and carnivals across the country.
He'd also made the statement to her that he was so good that he could be in a closed room straddling a dead body with a bullet in the brain of the body and him holding a gun in his hand that matched the bullet in the person's body, and that he would never be convicted.
With all the information given by Long's daughter, investigators believe he may have had hundreds of victims over the years. Elliott says they were able to track down more than half a dozen girls in various states who say they were approached by Long. Add to that the fact that he was a trained meat cutter and had once told a fellow inmate, if you cut the bodies up small enough and shove them down a rat hole, no one will ever find them. Elliott says they knew they were dealing with a serial killer.
I truly believe, and I think I can show you, that truly believe that the bodies are within 45 miles of where we sit right now, in a rat hole, just like he said, in some field grown over with grass.
Because the girls disappeared during the oil boom in Oklahoma, and they know Long delivered equipment to drilling rigs there, Elliott believes Long never left the state with the girls. Upon further investigation into oil-filled rat holes, he learned there could be tens of thousands of them in the area where Long worked.
And then to further add to that, when a well is completed, either by hitting oil or hitting a dry hole, the rat hole is capped off with concrete and forever forgotten.
But even today, more than 30 years later, Charlotte's family holds on to hope. Just a few months ago, while researching online, Christy Lane found her sister listed as one of 3 possible matches for remains found in Tennessee.
It's unreal how many unidentified remains are found in the United States alone that are never identified.
Although Charlotte was eventually ruled out as a match for those remains, Christy says coming so close has only fueled her efforts.
I thought even if you had to email every medical examiner that had remains fitting in that age group from them years, it would be worth it.
I became very close to the families, and I made them promises that I was unable to fulfill, because I promised them that I would convict Royal Russell Long.
Elliott says this case still haunts him till this day, and he says if he ever wins big in the lottery, he would spend it to help find the girls. In Oklahoma City, Jayla Gray,